Thanks, Count Corla. And Minister, I can assure you, unlike the previous issue, which is a small local issue which you say you have limited direct involvement over, this is actually a major issue which you have sole responsibility for. And in fact, your decision to appoint Fingal County Council as the competent authority under EU Regulation 598/14 has, to say, caused consternation is probably an understatement. There is uproar in the community as a result of this. People certainly didn't see this one coming as a result of the very obvious conflict of interest in this scenario. And let's remember what this regulation is and was. This was supposed to be the mechanism for the independent regulation of aviation noise, designed to protect communities from that intrusion. In order to transpose it, a competent authority had to be established in order to monitor such levels. And the reason why it's so important is that the DAA has made it abundantly clear that once that body is established, it is going to use it in order to try and overturn the two restrictions that are currently in place regarding the new runway, regarding nighttime flights. And this is of vital importance to the surrounding community, who, I might add, are not resisting the runway per se, but who are simply asking that the terms and conditions with which the permission was granted all those years ago, when in actual fact our knowledge of the damage of aviation noise on the health and well-being of surrounding residents was not as knowledgeable as it is now. But even then, those conditions were opposed almost 10 years ago. They want those conditions upheld. The DAA have made it no secret they want those restrictions lifted. And against that backdrop, the idea of appointing Fingal County Council, who were the ones who gave the DAA the original permission without the restrictions in the first place, is absolutely absurd to the local community. We should be very clear that not only that, but 20% of the rates income of Fingal County Council comes from the DAA. They are known, renowned for their deferential relationship that they have with the DAA, given the enormous value, I suppose, that the DAA is to the surrounding community. The idea of the Council being able to be impartial against that backdrop is absolutely crazy to residents. And it's a little bit ironic that the original choice, the IAA, was actually broadly accepted by the community, because even though, they are the ones who have the international reputation of excellence, they're highly technical in terms of their assessment of this, and while they do manage air traffic at Irish airports, there's no profit in them for them. If you like, their money comes from overflights, not actually the runway itself. So there's much less of a conflict of interest there with the IAA, who have the experience. And to be honest, I think I speak for all of the reps from all of the parties who attended the briefing that you organised last week in relation to this decision. We couldn't get our heads around the justification given by the department. They said the reason was what you were looking for is an organisation that had expertise in environmental impact assessments, in noise and in aviation. And without being disrespectful to anybody in Fingal County Council, while at a stretch we might grant them the first one, there's certainly no basis to the idea that they have an expertise in terms of noise or aviation, and yet they have a very, very clear conflict of interest. Minister, I really think you need to revisit this, go back to the drawing board and re-look at the IAA as the competent authority in terms of this regulation.
Thank you, Deputy Daly. Minister.
Yeah, I'd like to thank the Deputy for raising this question, and I'm glad it's been raised on the floor of the House now, and particularly after the briefing that was given to all the spokespeople last week. It is, I know the Deputy will understand, it's been a very difficult journey, dogged by legal problems for nearly 2 years at this stage, which has led us to this conclusion, with which I have to say I am happy. But it wasn't easy, because there are going to be people whoever is appointed as the competent authority say that that is the wrong one. We should have appointed a different one, not least the lawyers, but certainly TDs and others, and that's understandable, and that's why this is a useful debate. But I'm happy now, having made this appointment, having listened to the Attorney General on the IAA and others, that this is the correct appointment. There have been a number of contributions to the House on this matter over the course of the last 12 months or so, in particular in response to questions posed by Deputies Daly and Troy. As the Deputy knows, the EU noise regulation establishes a set of common rules and procedures to deal with noise issues at major airports within all EU member states. We don't have any option to appoint a competent authority because of the EU regulation. As the Deputy also knows and has mentioned, it was previously proposed that the Irish Aviation Authority would designate as noise regulator for the purpose of EU Regulation 498/14. However, as I explained in the Dáil before Christmas, when this approach was subject to final legal review, it was found to be impractical in light of emerging EU case law. It was a surprise for us as much as it was a surprise for you. Specifically, the advices were that the IAA would be conflicted, given its direct commercial interests in traffic growth at Dublin Airport. To offset these conflicts would have required the establishment of a noise regulation unit within the IAA that would have to be totally separate from the parent organisation in terms of resourcing, recruitment, performance management and HR management. This was considered wholly unworkable and clearly against corporate governance best practice. Having re-examined the matter as to how best to fully implement the EU regulation, Fingal County Council, with An Bord Pleanála as an independent appeals body, was considered the best way forward. Fingal already has responsibilities under an EU noise directive, which covers non-airport noise, and it has experience and expertise in environmental impact assessments and in managing extensive public consultations. There are quite a lot of synergies already, and so it makes sense to give it responsibility for airport noise regulation. Unquestionably, Fingal will have to build some additional expert capacity, and so the draft legislation will provide for additional funding to provide for this. The Government has endorsed this proposed course of action, and I now intend to get on with implementing it. There are, indeed, challenges. The regulation has already proven quite a complex provision to transfer and align with existing Irish planning and development arrangements. Indeed, on my instruction, as the Deputy has already alluded to and will be aware, departmental officials met with you and a number of other members of this House last week to hear your views, concerns, and also to talk over the complexities and challenges. It's so important that the runway goes ahead and that we have a competent authority, that we do involve anybody in this House and others outside in the decision-making process. As I understand it, that engagement was constructive, and it has been agreed to have follow-up engagement with the members, and I hope that Deputy Daly will attend those follow-up engagements. I and my department are sensitive to your concerns and are willing to find an agreed way through these, if at all possible. It's my intention to publish a draft bill as soon as possible. Doing so is a priority, and it will set out precisely how the new regulator will operate in accordance with Regulation 598/2014. There will be plenty of opportunity for examination of the proposals as the bill comes through the House. I would welcome them, starting with the pre-legislative scrutiny at the Dáil Transport Committee, to which many members here will attend, and others, including Deputy Daly, can also attend if they wish.
Thank you, Minister. Deputy Daly.
I would absolutely acknowledge that it has been a difficult journey, not least for the Minister, because he's in a very difficult position. The reality is that we had a previous Attorney-General who gave a diametrically opposed view on this issue to the one we presently have. Previously, we were told that the IAA was the best organisation for the job. A statutory instrument was sufficient to bring it into law. Now we've said there's a conflict of interest in the IAA and we need primary legislation. Now we welcome the fact that there will be primary legislation, but one of the purposes of this discussion is to say to the Minister in no uncertain terms, I think you will never, ever sell Fingal County Council as an independent, competent authority on these issues, and it is best that we address those issues now, rather than wasting even more time in dealing with this in the future. And I want to quote from Forum, the community organisation, who have been very vocal on this issue. They say, we want to see Dublin Airport prosper. We want to see increased connectivity. We have no wish to stop the development of the northern runway, but we do, however, believe that there needs to be a totally independent body. And the problem is, in the response given by the Minister, is it doesn't stack up to analysis. because an independent body within the IAA is not wholly unworkable. It already exists in terms of other areas of safety and so on. There are 2 independent bodies operating under the umbrella of the IAA. It's entirely possible to have this set up, and the IAA don't benefit financially from the planes landing at the airport. They get their profit mainly from overflights, so the conflict of interest there is far less than what it is for Fingal County Council, who I again say get 20% of their rates from the DAA, who have a much disproportionate influence on the development in that county, and whom the council already, years ago, gave the go-ahead without the conditions on nighttime restrictive flights, which are so important, that will be kept for the local community in order that the airport can be a good neighbour.
Thank you, Deputy Minister. To conclude.
Yeah, I think the issue of, I think it's unfair, or most unusual, to suggest that a local authority is conflicted in its role between the statutory environmental protection and enforcement responsibilities and wider economic and physical development roles. Local authorities already, as the Deputy will know, have a wide range of statutory-based regulatory and enforcement functions in relation to environmental quality, planning, enforcement and other areas which necessarily must sit alongside their rateable income and property tax collection functions. This is how local authorities operate. Assigning Fingal as the airport noise regulator, I think, is wholly aligned with that very long-established multifunctional role played by all local authorities. Importantly, it will also be subject to independent appeal, and we mustn't forget this, that it's not going to be acting completely on its own. There will also be on board Planola sitting there for appeal in all cases of noise regulation, who can't be considered to have a conflict of interest. I understand the Deputy's point of view. I know whoever we appoint or appointed would come under scrutiny, particularly from the lawyers, and it's obviously the IAA came across legal problems, and I know that this one will rightly come under scrutiny from TDs and other members. That's why we will involve deputies in as wide an engagement as possible on this, and have done, and do everything to ensure that their wishes are listened to and indeed adhered to and consented to by the government on this issue in order that we get the best possible result.
Thank you.